Now I want to welcome everybody to the Subcommittee on Infrastructure and Engineering. I'm Barb Olson. I'm one of the co-chairs, and I have a notice to read. Members of the board may participate remotely by telephone or electronic means due to the local public health emergency novel coronavirus pandemic declared on March 16, 2020, pursuant to the provisions of Minnesota Statute Section 13D-021. Welcome, and let's get started with, we're going to start with Hennepin Avenue South. So I'll turn it over. If somebody could pop up. I don't have the agenda printed out for some reason. I thought I had it, but I don't have it.
Becca, if you want to take it away and introduce your team, that'd be great.
Thank you. Thank you, Becca.
Great. Thanks for having us here. I'm Becca Hughes with the Public Works Department, Transportation Planner, with Jonette. She'll introduce herself in a second, helping to lead the design efforts for the Hennepin Avenue reconstruction. Alan cannot join us tonight, so it'll just be Jonette, myself. I don't know if Adam has joined or Amy, but if they do, they are also, Amy's here. That's the Hennepin team.
Well, welcome.
So thanks again for having us here tonight. I think this is the third time that we've been here in recent history. So we were last here in July and August to chat with you as we were kind of introducing and doing some early vetting with the project. And really the purpose of tonight, as you're well aware, we had 2 open houses the first week in March. And basically we want to provide you with a similar update to talk through the design options and analysis and to get your feedback on the 2 draft concepts that we rolled out at those 2 open house meetings.
Becca, can I stop you for 1 second?
Sure.
We had talked on one of the meetings. I think in general, the PAC has been in solid support of option 1. And since we have some ideas and options and things we'd like to share, we were hoping, if no one in the PAC that's at the meeting objects, that we could just focus on option 1, because the one with the bike lanes is the one that we are feeling most strongly about. Is that a possibility?
Sure. This presentation, I think we can whip through really quickly. Actually, Jonette will go through the majority of the design, and then there's a couple of key things we'd like your input on, in addition to all of the feedback that you've already talked through. So we can roll through this really quickly, and understood you want to focus on option 1. That's what the BAC wanted as well on Tuesday.
Okay, great.
Just a reminder, again, I'm sure everyone in the Pedestrian Advisory Committee knows that this is a reconstruction. It's about 1.4 mile segment, Douglas on the north, Lake Street on the south. Lots of stakeholder interest, as you can imagine, in this project. We have 3 neighborhood organizations, 2 special service districts, a business association, and lots of engaged residents and business owners, both along the corridor and within the neighborhood, that have been providing feedback to us on both of the options that we released in early March. And Jonette, I think, is taking it from here for a bit.
Yes, so the last time that we were with the PAC, we had several different options that had different configurations. Over the last few months, we've narrowed down all the, dozens of options that we looked at to 2 main design options. So option 1 is the one with the bikeway. Option 2 does not have a bikeway on Hennepin Avenue. These have been laid out along the whole corridor to give you enough information, enough detail for the PAC as well as the public to provide meaningful comments. I'll go to this. So this is just a snapshot of what the layout looks like with the sidewalks in the lightest color. We have a 2-way bikeway on the east side of Hennepin Avenue. We can talk more about the reasons why we propose that. 2 full-time transit lanes, which are shown in red, and then 2 vehicle lanes, 1 in each direction. The orange that you see on the layout are BRT stations. We do have left turns in some select locations throughout the corridor where left turns are not provided. This one at 26th, obviously southbound, you can't make a left turn. Where left turn lanes are not provided, left turns would be restricted during large portions of the day. And then this is an example near the BRT station. So this is near 25th. So you can see where we do have both the BRT platforms. We're also trying to achieve the bend out design to pull the bikeway away from Hennepin Avenue and provide that buffer space, provide the shortest crossing possible. You can see we do have some sidewalk constraints, and then you can see what it looks like where the BRT platform, the bike, and the sidewalk are all next to each other. As I mentioned, option 2, very similar in terms of the transit and the vehicle facilities. There is not a bikeway on Hennepin Avenue. What that means is that this sort of brownish orangish space is much larger. That space that can be used for greening, sidewalk cafes, sustainable stormwater features, on-street parking and loading. That's the main difference in this option. So again, just giving an overview shot of that. So you can see the, you're seeing more of the sort of green and brown areas, which indicate the boulevard and the furnishing zone. So at 25th, in the layout without the bikeway on Hennepin, there are actually left turn lanes at 25th. On the layout with the bikeway, that wasn't able to fit, and so the left turn lanes are moved in order to keep the BRT stations at 25th. So you can see there's a bit more space on the sidewalk and in the furnishing zone on this option. Then at 26th, as I mentioned, there aren't left turn lanes at 26th, so the left turns would be restricted during much of the day. Again, you can see the larger furnishing zone areas. And then this is one example of parking and loading. This is an issue that we have heard about quite a bit from businesses. We've also heard from some folks who don't want parking and loading in the corridor. We know that there are loading activities that do occur in the corridor. And if there aren't spaces for that to happen, that will happen in the bus lane, which is also not what we want. So there are some select locations where we are showing parking and loading. And that is in both options. There are more of those spaces on option 2 than option 1. Then there are a number of things that obviously we're still at a relatively early phase of the design. And so there are some things we just don't know yet. They need to be further explored. They're part of the detailed design. So some of those things have to do with green space, stormwater and green infrastructure, tabled crosswalks, particularly for the cross streets where they intersect Hennepin, the details about intersection corners and geometry, and then parking and loading on cross streets. Some of the specific things that we identified where the PAC input would be most helpful. We started a list here. Becca, do you want to touch on these briefly?
Sure. Just in terms of the bikeway and the sidewalk design separation treatment on option 1, we'd love to hear more of your thoughts about that. The sidewalk width for option 2, it doesn't sound like we want to spend much time there, but there are clearly opportunities for us to expand the PAR in some of those areas in certain locations along the corridor. If there are specific elements, boulevard or furnishing zone elements that you'd like to address tonight that you think are key or critical elements along Hennepin, that'd be good to know. I imagine that there might be some interest in benches and other types of amenities like that. In terms of the minor street intersections, I think it would be good to hear your thoughts on incorporating tabled crosswalks along the corridor, what your thoughts are related to the median. We've heard some mixed opinions about it, but curious what the PAC thinks about that. And then also the crossings that have been put in place on some of the shorter block segments along Hennepin. as well as just, general comments related to operations, whether it's LPI, no turn on red restrictions, things of that nature, I think would also be beneficial, in addition to the other topics that you'd like to talk about tonight. So thanks again. That was our presentation. Hopefully that was short enough and enough of an overview, and we're happy to address questions.
Great, thank you, Becca. And thank you both. Feedback, comments?
Could we get clarity on where we're at in the process first? I know that there's more engagement happening in July, but I'm just curious, like, is this going to TPW? What is happening in July? What will you come back to us then to ask about versus what is definitely sort of being narrowed or focused today?
Sure, it's a great question. In terms of the overall schedule, you've probably heard that we have been able to push out construction a bit on the project, and that gives us a few months more to work with this year, which we're happy about. So we would anticipate coming back to the PAC probably 2 more times, 1 more time as an increment before we bring a final design option. Being at the 10 to 15%, we still have some work to do. Obviously, as Jonette mentioned, there's a lot of detailed design work we need to work through. We are still intending to move forward to TPW, at least at this time, for layout approval in August. So that's generally the schedule that we're working with, and we've got a little bit of play in there because of the push of construction out to 2024.
So TPW is in August. The overall, like the whole city council, whatever happens, the final where everything is set is out even further than that.
Well, layout approval is typically about the 30% marker, and that's when we bring it forward to council. So we're about halfway there theoretically to layout approval for council. Detailed design, the 30 to 100% transpires after layout approval.
I just had a note. Like, I know you're looking for minor intersections. Is there a reason can we talk about major intersections or only minor?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we want to hear about all of them, and we anticipate we'll hear a little bit about Lake Lagoon and Franklin. So of course we want to hear about all the intersections. It's just that, in past conversations we've had with the PAC, there's been a desire on some of those minor intersections to provide the connections and crossings across the street. And so that's one element that's been incorporated, and just curious if that's adequate, if you think there needs to be more treatment there. That was the only purpose of highlighting minor intersections.
Totally. And maybe someone else can speak to it. My biggest concern is widths of crossings. So my biggest concern is just anywhere space where a pedestrian interacts with the cars. Like, we can, I think that, yeah, we might want to talk about sidewalk widths and this and that, but what we're really afraid of is, I think it's like at Lagoon, there's 5 lanes of traffic to cross to go to the library, and that's unacceptable. And then also the bus lane disappears, like, what the heck? But then in addition to that, all the curb cuts are problematic as well, because as you know, Hennepin has those sort of T-like intersections where, one of the streets comes out at an angle because Hennepin is angled, right? And so a lot of those as well, I think there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for potentially, I don't know what other PAC members think about this, but it's like another curb cut, intersections like that. I think there's opportunities to cut down on those intersections between where cars and pedestrians cross each other. And I just didn't know if you had plans. I know that you're looking at potentially closing a lot of curb cuts for parking where they can enter and exit on the side streets. So yeah, you're looking at closing a lot of parking lot entrances off of Hennepin. So people have to get on, like here in your example, they get in and out on Fremont. But yeah, so I was just wondering, what are the conditions to make sure that those things actually happen? What are the conditions for also closing those edged streets from allowing cars in and out? And what are your reasons for not allowing left turn lanes at certain hours, but disallowing them 24 hours a day, or putting in a median there as an alternative for some of these smaller streets, like here on 25th, for example? Okay, how about I'll start, and then Jonette, maybe you can address some of the
the intersections Lake Lagoon and the bus lane facility. Yes, this is definitely a work in progress. As you're well aware, what we've tried to do is flag the private curb cut accesses to businesses, right? Whether it's a parking lot or what have you. And we've had some really good conversations. So I feel like we're moving in the right direction that way. In terms of the streets that you've indicated, we've heard a lot of varying feedback, right? We've heard from people that say it should be closed, and I certainly understand that. We've also heard from the public saying that some of these that are one-way should be converted to two-way to allow better access. So we're hearing a lot of different feedback. I think it's good to hear from the PAC, and if there are specific or if it's all, just kind of clarity on how you'd like us to approach, for example, like Emerson, as we have up on the screen. If it, I'll say that is our next step. That's one of our next steps in terms of working into detailed design, is that we know we need to address how those cross streets intersect or don't intersect, frankly, in the future with Hennepin, and we're just not there yet.
And as Becca mentioned, we are in the midst of conversations with property owners about driveways and working through various options for what that means if some driveways are closed. There are also driveways that we know we can't close, but they can be significantly narrower than what they are today. So we're looking at all those opportunities in our inactive conversations. So to the left turn question, what we were trying to achieve here, so where there is not a left turn lane, there's a couple considerations. First, from a safety perspective, but also from an operations perspective. So what we know is that if left turns at an intersection like this, if left turns are allowed, a driver will sit there and then people will dive around them in the bus lane, which is not great for buses. It also isn't great for the person that's crossing in the crosswalk on the west side, because that driver that wants to make the left turn, they're looking for a gap in those in the oncoming traffic, and then they're going to go for it, and they're not looking at who is in that crossing. So that applies to both sides. Certainly,
a sign won't save us. Like a sign that says no left turn won't stop a car from turning left, but like a median would. So what is your decision on just putting up signs and not more physical barriers, I guess, is my question.
So many of these intersections do have left turn restrictions in the morning and in the afternoon. And from the traffic data we have pre-COVID, those left turn restrictions, certainly not everyone follows the rules, but there are relatively few people that make left turns where it's restricted. We are looking at things like blank out signs and other applications to try to reinforce that. The question about why don't we just close the intersections, that really gets to some of the neighborhood circulation. And that also plays into some of the streets like Emerson and Fremont, is the ability for vehicles to continue to access businesses, neighborhoods. As it is, there are some cases where that access is now less direct. But we're not trying to make it, access still needs to be maintained to those areas. So we're trying to strike that balance. So as Becca mentioned, some people have said, well, since I now have to circulate around the block, why can't some of these streets be two-way instead of one-way? That would be better for circulation, since people can't turn left where they want to turn left.
I've got a question that's related to that. I just looking at the design and spending quite a bit of time walking it while looking at it as well. I'd like to see, I think this is a comment more than a question. I would like to see the design team look at approaching MnDOT to remove the on and off ramps from Hennepin. We know that that's the direction that we're moving towards nationally. And it seems like a lot of the what must feel really constricting on the design end is dealing with these particular highway on and off ramps onto a city street, a community and residential corridor. And if there's $10 billion that's coming up to help remove the the highways that break apart and hurt our city. This seems like it might be a great opportunity to start with that and to make that request, especially since the city has previously requested looking into removing other portions of highway. And I've also been in the car with people since looking at the designs and checked, like this isn't the only access point for cars. There's still that other exit and other entrances, whether it's entering on Lindale or exiting on sort of that Oak Grove exit and then turning left onto Hennepin. It doesn't remove that access, but it seems like it would shift the numbers enough to address, some of the most dangerous intersections in Minneapolis, like Hennepin and Franklin, more robustly. So that's a related comment. I'm also, I don't know if Abigail or others had more on that, but I want to really push about having bike lanes that go the full length of the corridor. I walk this corridor a lot, and people bike where they need to be, and they bike where they feel safe. And especially on the portion between Franklin and Douglas, if you're heading northbound biking, you are on the sidewalk, or you're taking contraflow against multiple lanes of traffic that, vehicles, drivers not expecting to stop. And that's a particularly drag racing section of the street for a street that has a lot of that. So I don't think that we can handle a reconstruction that doesn't make sure that that doesn't protect people who are biking so that they're not on the sidewalks there. That's how it functions right now. And it seems like the 2 lanes to 1 lane to 2 lane to 1 lane that happens from Douglas to 22nd seems like it could be, it just seems weird that we're not able to have protected bus lanes or biking, and the sidewalk is 5 feet wide at one of the places where we know is most dangerous for people outside of cars in our entire city.
I don't think there was a question there necessarily, other than maybe talking with MnDOT, and that's something that we had brought up a couple of years ago, and we had started this project back in 2018 to talk about the fact that we were applying for the regional solicitation of the federal funds for the project. So we've had that conversation in increments. They sit on our TAC, our Technical Advisory Committee, and there hasn't been an expression of interest in pursuing that, but that's certainly something that we can continue to mention in our conversations with them.
Would the expression of interest come from them, or would it come from what does it take to get that conversation going? Because it seems like it would have been really a different conversation under the last administration than now looking at what we're seeing coming out of the US DOT. So if there's a way for starting that or getting that.
I mean, I know that there are conversations universally with management at both agencies about these types of issues as it relates to access to the regional system from streets in the city. I'm not privy to exactly where we're at with those conversations, but clearly this would be one of many examples of those conversations. And so what we can do is again flag the interest, especially from the Pedestrian Advisory Committee, to look into that more, to see if that's a possibility. And there's no question that federally things are changing, and so perhaps there's an opportunity. So we're happy to address that or to look into it.
It's literally 3 blocks, and they're short blocks down to the Lindale entrance, and I think it's basically Douglas to Franklin plus another block and a half-ish for the exit. So those seem like really a lot of on-off for a tiny, tiny portion. Does that look like it would be a good candidate for this because of that and because of the city control of this street, or does that not change it?
I'm just going to say that we haven't had detailed conversations or that level of detail of disconnecting Hennepin from the regional system. That's not been anything that I've been involved in having conversations with, and whether that's happening at a managerial level. I don't want to get into, I don't know how MnDOT screens or looks at these different elements as being a positive on one corridor and not on another. I don't know the considerations that they make, but spatially perhaps that would be a good argument. I don't know. I can just say that right now that I'm not aware of any active conversations between the city and MnDOT regarding this connection.
Thank you.
Julia, and I flagged this topic for a P&P too, for when Hennepin reaches that.
Okay, great. I thought it was more specific. I'm sorry for
No, not at all. No, I'm just about to both. It's just we can take it up. We can make sure we take it up again.
Could we discuss the lane widths and the median width? The median is interesting to me, but it seems like because of the curb reaction time, we've got 4 feet plus another additional 3 to 4 feet that we're losing from pedestrian and people space to cars by having a median and by having it that wide and having it that long. Is that something you could, like, I don't know where other people are on that, or how we can get more space back for people from that sort of no man's land.
Yeah, on the medians, we are showing 4-foot medians. Those medians there's a few different ways that we could go about designing those. Depending on the width, determines whether that can support any greening in those medians. That definitely is part of the detailed design. In terms of the lane width, it is a 10-foot lane plus a 1-foot gutter at the median side. And then obviously we're showing 4-foot median here. The final width of that median would be more of a design detail. Julia, are you expressing that you would prefer that the median be narrower and the space moves back to the outside versus having green in the middle?
I mean, green in the middle does me no good. It seems to, and watching how drivers interact with those along Hennepin, they throw trash, and that's like, it's used. I mean, I guess I appreciate it because some people who are signing will use them and it keeps them safe. And I feel like their presence helps remind drivers that there are humans, but I wish we weren't in a situation where people have to sign for money to, meet their needs. So overall, I want the green to be where pedestrians are. And I also have accessibility concerns that illegal crossings can happen anywhere from Douglas, except for Franklin, to 22nd, and then again till 27th because of the light things. And this means that it's that much harder for anybody who has trouble with a curb to make those crossings wherever they want to, and they're legally allowed to. So I have a little bit of concern about that, especially, like, I'd like to see the medians protect people in the crosswalk and the medians prevent turns at the dangerous points. I really appreciate the intent behind them. But I'm just concerned about losing that much space and bumping people. Like, the bike lanes are so narrow. I would way rather have sufficient bike lanes than a green median, or at least for that length. Like,
yeah, I think, Julia, I don't know if other people also have comments given time, but yeah, I think you make a point, and that should be in our resolution for sure, that the space shouldn't be given to a median, space should be given to pedestrians on either end, or green space on either end. And also it would shorten crossing distances, and because 4.5 feet is also not like, the same kind of safety barrier kind of median as we'd want if it were for that, like, refuge. So I don't know if you guys have a comment to that, but we are going to put that in a resolution because we think medians are not the best way to utilize this street space, and cars should have to kind of pass each other against a yellow line. And I think it'll be traffic calming. It'll also slow them down. A median will allow them to hug that gutter pan, and then you can also make a 10-foot travel lane because there won't be a gutter pan.
Well, I think we feel pretty strongly about having some sort of treatment, and the reason for that, and Jonette, you can expand on this, but part of the reason for that is because there are so many access points along the corridor. I mean, we're going to be doing our best to try and minimize that so that we have less conflicts with left turning cars that are trying to cross, the bus lane and one through lane to access properties, but this ensures that that doesn't happen. So if I'm a pedestrian that's walking on that side of the street, I'm not worried about a northbound car if I'm walking southbound. So we feel like the median is a critical design element, frankly, and sure, it can be different widths, it can look different ways. The idea of making it 4 feet was frankly a starting point so that we could have something that wasn't just concrete, right? So that we could have it as some sort of amenity space, or even potentially use it for stormwater infiltration or green infrastructure or something of that nature. And we're getting into the details on that right now, whether that's even frankly feasible within a 4-foot space. We recognize that trees would be very difficult to maintain in a 4-foot median. It's just Typically you need 5 feet or more is what we're seeing from best practices. So really the intent, we believe frankly that we need access control on the corridor given all of the conflicts in the left turning vehicles. We think that improves safety along the corridor, what it looks like, whether it's green, whether it's concrete, whether it's a foot, whether it's 2 feet. I mean, those sorts of things I believe are negotiable. Jonette, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the only other thing I would just add is we, as we looked at this, there were very few sections that either between intersections or driveways that even with driveway consolidations, every block had numerous locations where there was the potential for essentially a vehicle to turn left into a driveway. And that's what we felt strongly that the medians were needed to address that issue.
I just wanted to clarify, Abigail, I'm not necessarily against the medians. I think that they're really interesting for the reasons that Becca and Jeanette highlighted, but I'm curious about the application and the way it impacts the widths that you described. And most of my bad interactions are with right turning drivers. So I want to zip it so other people can participate, but it's an interesting treatment that I keep thinking about.
How about other PAC members that haven't jumped in quite yet?
I just have a question as a new member. I'm wondering the bus lanes, are those going to be 24 hours or? No.
Hi, Matt, you just froze. I did hear the question about would they be 24 hours? The intent right now is that they would be designated as 24-hour bus lanes, correct? I didn't hear the rest of your question, however.
I have a follow-up though.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if they are 24 hours. Can you hear me? Sorry. That was timing. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
We can, yeah.
Okay. I'm wondering then, as a follow-up to that, if they are kind of what the thinking between making it 4 lanes between Uptown Transit and Lake Street again there, because I believe that it goes back down to 2 lanes after that on both sides.
Yeah, I'm going to rely on Jonette to answer this one. Believe me, we've struggled with the 3 really busy intersections, Lake Lagoon and Franklin, for lots of issues, but we knew we'd get questions on this. So Jonette, I'll turn it over to you to get into more of the specifics. Thanks.
Yeah, so one of the challenges between the Uptown Transit Station and Lake Street is that the blocks are very short. They're shorter than the other parts of the corridor. They're also a lot of turning vehicles, and so trying to manage the vehicle traffic through this area, also providing good bus facilities. We tested a lot of options. What we're showing now is what we feel is the best, not only for buses but for traffic. And so that's what we're showing. Certainly, this is an area that we have heard comments on, and we'll continue to take a close look at.
Yeah, I think the PAC generally would just say that crossing Hennepin at Lagoon is way too wide and there's far too many car lanes. So I'm sure that'll be in our resolution as well. Same for Lake and same for Franklin, but the bus lane there would also be a huge get because that prioritizes buses. That tells the world, hey, we prioritize buses as the city. We prioritize you taking transit, and oh, you're stuck in a bunch of congestion. That's a good thing. You should think about getting out of your car and getting on that really fast bus right there next to you. So I think that's something you guys should think about. I think you're supposed to make a statement here on your policies, not try to match what currently exists on the corridor.
Are there anyone else have questions or comments for Becca?
I do, but I want to make sure other people have a chance.
I wonder also if we're at time though, Julia.
We've got about 11 minutes.
Oh, wow.
I think
45. Right?
I think 5:10 we should cut it off.
Oh, you want to? Okay. So
Okay.
we've got 6 minutes.
We're not seeing crossings at all legs of all intersections. Is concerning to me. It seems to prioritize right turning vehicles over people who want to cross the street, and that's been a consistent ask from the PAC. We do see them with the bus turn, which is that one surprised me as even being feasible since it seems to be mostly bus turning motions. But we need to have them everywhere. And I'm curious about what's being done to address the late night drag racing and what happens in a lot of the times of the day where there aren't as many drivers. It's not a pleasant street to be on. Raising all intersections, I would think we would want to support removing as many driveways as possible, regardless of like using any means the city has at its disposal. I'm glad that that's being examined. Those make things really bad. And tightening the radii, I don't know if we're getting into that, and some of the really weird turning motions. We're also not seeing all legs of all intersections for all the north-south streets that truncate into the east-west streets that cross Hennepin, and there's very odd driver behaviors at those, especially in off-peak times, where there aren't drivers preventing like just random driving across things. And I'll zip it again.
Okay, you were kind of going in and out a little bit for me, so Jonette, I don't know if you heard all of that.
I didn't quite hear something. I heard something about the right turns and the bus lane, but I didn't quite understand the comment.
Sorry. All legs of all intersections, we are not currently seeing crossings at those. That includes where north-south streets meet up with the east-west streets that cross Hennepin, like where Emerson meets up with, I think it's 24th, and then you can cross Hennepin on 24th. There's very driver behaviors, like we're not getting all legs of all intersections at those, even those are being addressed. We don't have both sides of the Emerson crossing marked. And we also get odd driver behaviors at those streets at 22nd, particularly during off-peak hours of drivers just going wherever. So I'm curious about more treatments that really get drivers to stop treating the strange angles of Hennepin as a license for dangerous behaviors in all ways. The left turning motions from 24th going southbound onto Hennepin from westbound 24th is that one I've nearly died at multiple times, and like very, very close misses. And I don't see what's changing to really get drivers making the appropriate turns so they see people and so they know to respond. So I think those were the ones I wanted to raise.
And maybe I can just start by saying that, you know, as we talked about at the top of the presentation, I mean, the cross street intersections and the treatments there and the radii are things that we still need to work through as part of detailed design. So I would anticipate that the next time you might see us, there'll be some adjustments there. In terms of, you know, well, I guess specifically for the Emerson leg, you know, that's something that we had consulted with internally with our city staff and design folks at the city. And, you know, it's something that certainly we can relook at again, but the determination, at least just for this draft concept, was one leg, but we can certainly look at two.
Emerson seems like the one where there's the least amount between the two. At the others, it's more critical, and it's definitely PAC policy, like on Emerson, where it pops out into Hennepin, we're not getting all of our legal crossings. And then there's also the small unnamed street near Jefferson School, and we're not getting our legal crossings there. It's looking like it's a driveway, but it's functionally a street. And I just really want to make sure that that's I don't want to have to argue about that in PAC meetings. I understand that we might still have to, but I want us to have all legs of all intersections as a default. So yeah, it shows as a driveway just to the north and across from 25th and a half.
And that one we have actually talked about, and you know, what this concept is proposing is that rather than have that piece look like a public street where, you know, the pedestrians ramp down and cross and ramp back up, This is actually proposing that the sidewalk and bikeway stay level, and it will look more like a driveway than a street.
Based on my experiences on driveways on Hennepin, drivers do not respect sidewalks at all. I've had people get out of their cars to yell at me for being literally on the sidewalk when they wanted to turn. It's a really horrible street to be on with the entitlement from drivers. But when we talk about tabling intersections, that seems like that would still be like, it should be tabled regardless of whether it's a street or a driveway. If we're talking about tabling or doing raised intersections at all intersections, including these minor ones. So hopefully that would be a moot point in terms of a reason to treat it as driveway versus street.
Okay, we're right at 5:10. We're going to have to wrap it up. I have one thing I want to say is that I agree with Abigail in terms of the support for the transit. I really think that's important, and I don't understand why it's cut off from Lagoon to 31st. So I'd like to see that. Well, that will probably be in our resolution as well. But thank you, Becca, and thank you, Jeanette. We appreciate it. These are interesting conversations.
Thank you.
Thank you.
They certainly aren't easy. Thanks for tonight.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Next up is Franklin West with Katie White.
Hi, I'm going to take a second. Matthew has the patience of a saint. I'm going to try to present this and still be able to watch the screen. I have a 50% success on this technology. So I'm going to start with, oh, now I'm afraid I'm frozen. I'm going to wait until maybe, hopefully I'm no longer frozen and you can hear me again.
I can hear you.
We can hear.
We can hear you.
You can hear me, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, terrific. My computer is keeps flashing on and off, and so I don't actually have a screen right now. So thank you for communicating with me audibly. Can you confirm that you can see the title page for my presentation? You can. Terrific.
Yep.
Okay, thanks so much. So I'm here with our 30% design for the reconstruction of Franklin Avenue between Hennepin and Lindale. I was last here in December, I believe, to talk to this group. And let's see, now everything has shifted again. Okay, so I'll go briefly over a lot of the same material that I touched on since December, since the December design that we talked about informs greatly the design that you see today. And I'm happy to take questions after that. As a reminder for folks, we are concluding the preliminary concept design work, moving into detailed engineering for the rest of 2021, and we're preparing for construction in 2022. It's going to be one construction season, which in Minnesota is April to November for this segment. And I guess I don't have the graphic here, but it's just the 3 blocks from Hennepin Avenue, which of course we were just talking about, to Lindale Avenue. So the project goals are to improve the pedestrian experience, provide an all ages and abilities bicycle facility, support existing and future development along the corridor, and incorporate green infrastructure if possible, while also incorporating existing city policies. So this was the December 2nd draft. I'm going to blow through this a little quickly in order to save time for your specific questions on this. A big improvement that is being proposed here is this median at Bryant. Bryant Avenue is a bicycle boulevard, and just to the north of this drawing is the Loring Greenway, which provides at least 1,200 bicycles a day with a trip. And so there's a lot of bicycle traffic going through here. There's currently a median at Bryant. It's sort of this far western portion here and this far eastern portion here exists today. The proposal is to make it larger and also add this middle component, which would prohibit left turns in all directions and would prohibit a north-south movement for cars on Bryant, while providing channels here for bicycles in the middle and pedestrians to the side. Adding boulevards, there's really no boulevard out there today, and green stormwater infrastructure where possible. Right now we're talking about little curb cuts essentially to allow water to access these new green spaces instead of running straight down the hill down to Lindale. The sidewalks here are at least 6 feet wide. In some places they are 8 feet. Talking about adding a bicycle facility behind the curb eastbound traffic on the south side of the street and westbound traffic on the north side of the street. Transit amenities here, a shelter dedicated for Route 2 customers here instead of sharing with Hennepin Avenue customers over here. A shelter here on the south side over at Lindale, and a signpost again, because it's mostly people getting off. This is the end of the 2, the second to last stop on the 2, so very few people wait for the bus at this location. And 5 parking spaces, 3 here in a bay, pulling them out of traffic a little bit, and then 2 more parking spaces on the other side of Aldrich. So that's what we talked about last December. We then engaged in our typical outreach process. We used open houses, online neighborhood meetings, online surveys, and one-on-one conversations for email and also over the phone to gather feedback from folks interested in this corridor. Also connected with property owners along the corridor about right-of-way and construction impacts. Those questions have been coming already. And generally the feedback was really positive. We ran some numbers about, statistically based on who participated, how people felt, but feedback has been positive, if a little quiet. This has not been incredibly controversial. So that being said, some changes have been incorporated since December 2nd. The first is we're including the evaluation of raised crossings at Aldrich and Bryant on the north and south sides of the street. It is too early in the design process right now to know if they're a good fit for this corridor. The steepness of the hill down to Lindale can make raised crossings too difficult to incorporate. This difficulty is tied to grade changes, the dirt underneath the asphalt, substantial impacts to Bryant and Aldrich. If we only have to touch 50 feet of Bryant or Aldrich, maybe that's okay. But if we have to touch 200 feet of Aldrich and Bryant, that might be too much. And of course, cost. We'll know in early 2022 if raised crossings can be incorporated. The other thing that we're changing is that, I've sort of gone out of my way over the last several months to say, we're not touching the corners at Hennepin because the Hennepin project is touching those corners. And we're not touching the corners at Lindale because it's a county facility. And we didn't want to get things too complicated with the county. Well, that has now changed at Lindale. When we were looking to tie in the new bicycle and pedestrian facilities at the corner at Lindale, it was getting kind of awkward and crowded if we didn't touch those corners. And so we had a good internal conversation a couple of times with other folks in Public Works and determined that we could rebuild the corners at Lindale without causing too much cost and signal needs. Just for the placement of where the signals are, makes it possible to touch the concrete underneath it without getting too expensive on the signal work, that's above the ground. And so we're going to be rebuilding those western corners now included in this Franklin Avenue reconstruction. We've looped in the county, of course, to this work, and they've given us a preliminary okay, and we'll continue to work with them over the next year as part of the design process. So that being said, here's our new design that we're talking about. These light sort of pastel yellow colors indicate the potential for future tabled crossings. Again, we're not sure right now that we can say 100% confirmed that we'll be including raised crossings, but it is something that we're dedicated to continuing the conversation on over the next several months, and hopefully we'll be able to incorporate. And then the other changes here, of course, the corners being rebuilt at Lindale. Other things, very small things, if you compared the December design to the March design, this section of the bikeway originally sort of did a little jog. There was a bend in and then a bend out again. We've been able to straighten that out. But in general, the main components of this project have remained very similar. So that's the summary of what's going on, but I wanted to spend most of the time talking about your questions, if that's okay with you.
Thank you, Katie. Excuse me. Thank you, Katie. Any questions or comments for Katie regarding the design?
I just have a question regarding that, the slope down to Lindale, particularly on the north side. Has there been any developments, discussion, concepts about that since December?
Are you talking about the development itself on the corner?
No, I'm talking about the sidewalk, that, I mean, that I just personally, I find it somewhat treacherous in the winter just because of the grade and stuff. I know we had talked about, well, maybe there's a possibility for a railing. Maybe there's, you know, different things that we had discussed in December. Has there been any additional thought about that or consideration?
You know, I couldn't find a good example to advance or replicate here. I think that one of the better opportunities, and I've been talking with our development team because the former, I forget the title, Vision Loss Resources maybe, because this is going to be redeveloped eventually, there might be an opportunity to take that new concept whenever they propose it and build in some features, but I don't think it would be a public facing feature like a handrail. Otherwise, I'm not sure that that's something that we're equipped to advance right now. So I don't know where that, what our opportunity is there.
Thank you.
Well, I will say I like the addition of the green space. I think that will make it a much more pleasant place to walk. And I also like the 8-foot lanes or the 10-foot lanes. I think that's helpful as well.
Yeah, I think that this is an example of, you know, it's an 80-foot right of way, which is a lot. And we have a lot of space to play with, and that gives us the opportunity to fit in a lot of everything. And so we have had the trade-off conversations, and we can't get absolutely everything in there, but this is pretty successful, I think, from a lot of different perspectives.
Can I ask, are the parking spaces needed because of businesses, or were they required by, or were they asked for by residents? Since there's only what looks like 5.
Yeah, that's a great question. Parking is being retained because the neighborhood itself is generally pretty busy for parking. Franklin itself is not super busy for parking. Right now, there's a lot of time restrictions. And so I think a lot of people choose not to park on Franklin because, you know, no parking during rush hour, and you can only park for an hour during the day. And it's just sort of a lot of, if I park here, am I going to have to move? And it's just confusing. So I think people avoid it. So Franklin today does not get a lot of parked cars. The side streets, however, are very well parked up. Heard a lot from landlords in the area who are concerned that they will lose tenants because of the lack of available free on-street parking. But that being said, also during engagement, we heard a lot of people say, well, we need metered parking so the cars turn over more often. We also heard people say it needs to be resident-only parking. There's been movement in the neighborhood, so people want to designate this as a critical parking area for residents only. So that hasn't been determined yet for these 5 parking spaces. But the 5 parking spaces were retained because some people are interested in maintaining additional parking capacity in the neighborhood.
Is there any transition plan for moving those away from parking to other uses, or to making sure that they are accessible to people who don't have own cars? If we're doing, you know, free public space that people can set stuff in, it seems like this might be an area where, sure, there's not parking when you're renting, but you also don't have a place to garden. But
say, Julie, you're garbling. Your audio is garbling some again.
Is this okay? Is this better?
It's not particularly good, Julia.
Okay.
You know, so I did hear the question though, Julia. I don't know that our parking division has been looking at parking spaces being used for alternative uses. At this point in the design, we don't indicate if it's resident only or metered only or flexible or available as part of a new program. I am deferring to our parking team to determine which kind of parking is most appropriate for this space.
Any other questions or comments? Are you, I will ask you, are you looking for a resolution for this presentation, or?
You know, we are looking to take this to our Transportation and Public Works Committee on Wednesday, March 31st. And I had a conversation with Matthew this week about how the timing doesn't work out great for when your next full committee meeting is. So I'll defer to Matthew on what he prefers from a procedural perspective. But we can certainly include language in the draft that's going to our Public Works Committee that will be taking your comments into consideration as we move to final design.
Yeah, I guess part of the thought was depending on where you all are as a committee. I think unless there was like a major like fundamental change that you thought should be made, any comments that may come out of the resolution, I think could probably definitely be addressed in final design as well. I guess I was curious to see what you think. So your resolution will still be helpful for the project, is I guess the point.
Okay. Right. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great.
Okay. Terrific. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie.
Thank you.
I'll be back in 20 minutes.
Oh, okay. Next up is Jason Stable for the Lindale South.
Hello. Kelsey, are you on, or?
Oh, there's Kelsey too. Hi, Kelsey.
Okay. Great, everyone. I'm here. I think most people know me, but Kelsey Foot with the city. I'm one of the transportation planners working on this project with Jason and Nairman. Jason, I will hand it over to you.
Excellent. Yeah, so I'm Jason Stabell with Hennepin County Transportation Design, and then Nairman Vanaki is also on. He's Project Delivery Assistant Director. So I'm going to talk about the upcoming safety improvements we're going to hopefully roll out here at later this year at 25th and 27th Street. And then Nairman will finish it up with kind of discussing the future of Lindale Avenue and some upcoming news on that. So in 2020, some initial temporary safety improvements were put out at these two intersections to try to address some safety concerns of crossing in these two locations.
Jason, I think we lost your PowerPoint.
Dang it again, two times now. It's not like I don't do this every day. Let's see, sorry about that.
You can see it now.
Okay, some initial temporary delineators were put out at 25th and 27th. So you can see that at this intersection here. Very temporary, trying to quickly address some concerns. And so these delineators were to restrict left turns from Lindale and from the cross street onto Lindale, and then try to get some separation off the curb line for pedestrians to cross. So it's very temporary, and we're hoping to expand upon this with a more interim solution that truly does restrict the left turns, because as you can see, there's a gap in those center line delineators. So there's probably a lot of violations of people taking left turns there. I see what I do. Aha. Golly. Okay. So the current interim safety improvement will be to install a raised concrete median add rectangular rapid flashing beacons, RRFBs, add some intersection street lighting, and then upgrade the pedestrian ramps on all the quadrants. So I'll show this in more of a layout view here in the next slide, but the RFB's examples would be the at 66th Avenue in Richfield. It's a photo on the right side. So what we're looking at here is 25th Street West, and what we're proposing to put in is a 12-foot concrete median with pedestrian cross-throughs on both quadrants, the two quadrants crossing. And these will be painted crosswalks with the RFBs throughout the quadrants and actually into the center median. With this proposed design, the travel lanes get pushed out towards the curb line, and we'll be maintaining the 2 lanes in each direction. We'll talk more about the future of this corridor soon, but this is a quicker project to try to get some sort of improvement out there in the interim. And so you can see the bus stops will be relocated slightly to be further away from the intersection. And our goal is to have this later this summer. So this is 25th Street. 27th is very similar design. Same things will be put in, and it's about the same type of look for each intersection. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Nariman to kind of talk about beyond this project.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Yeah, so today we're here to really talk about the project that's coming up this year and these 2 safety improvements at the locations that Jason referenced. But we understand there's an interest in the corridor as a whole, and so we want to make sure we address that and can answer any questions you may have on that as well. So as Jason mentioned, really what's being done out there, proposed to be done out there this year, would be a continuation of the delineators that were placed in 2020, and we had a listening session with the neighborhood and with the interested community back in 2019, and this is kind of a progression on that. But really, to address the corridor as a whole and make the safety improvements necessary for the corridor as a whole, we really feel like a reconstruction project is what we need to accomplish that. And so we've been focusing a lot of our attention and energy on that process. And so last year, it was included in our 2021 CIP, transportation CIP, as a provisional project. And we continue to work towards having a fully funded project for this corridor. So we also understand that that process can take some time, and so we want to continue to look at all of the available options we have to improve safety out there. So in addition to what Jason referenced during his presentation, we also have begun looking at the feasibility of a potential 4 to 3 lane restriping project. And so that, like I said, that process has begun and will continue through the next few months here. And as that process develops, we'd be happy to come out and talk to folks again specifically about that. So just like I said, want to touch on a couple other developments along the corridor, and we're happy to answer any specific questions on the project that we're presenting here today. Or if you have any questions about some of these future efforts, we can do our best to answer that as well.
I have a question regarding the future. Once it becomes a fully funded project, is it a 5-year timeline, or what are we talking about once funding is secured?
Yeah, it's a great question. It kind of depends. Depends on what type of funding we get and when it gets into our CIP. But I think the time frame that you outlined is pretty accurate. Generally, takes anywhere from 3 to 4 years to design a big project like this. Especially in a project like this that would have robust community engagement. And that takes time too. So yeah, I think typically that 5-year window is probably pretty accurate. But again, it depends on the project and some specifics with that project.
Thank you for that clarification. It seems to me that, if there's, I'm just picking numbers, if there's a couple years before funding can be identified, and then 4 or 5 years after that, we're looking 7 years out, potentially, just for discussion purposes. I think that really underscores the need to do a 4-3 striping. And can you offer any more guidance on what it means for a pilot project? Are they just talking about a couple of blocks or something, or what does that mean?
Yeah, so the reason we reference it as a pilot project is because we would want to do some level of analysis if we were to proceed with that type of project, where we'd do some preliminary analysis of the existing corridor, and then follow up with a follow-up analysis after any sort of restriping was implemented, so that we can learn more about how it functions. What does it do to side streets or neighboring side streets? What does it do for the number of vehicles that are traveling down it? What does it do for, all those sort of things that we would be interested to learn on? And so that's why we reference it as a pilot, because there would be some higher level analysis that would go along with it, maybe different than some of our other 4-3 conversions that the county has done recently. So.
And I'll just ask one more follow-up question, then I'll be quiet. With that being said, just so I understand, is then the idea of, just let's talk from Franklin to Lake, for example, is the concept, or what would be a potential timeline to have a 4-3 conversion done, let's just say from Franklin to Lake? Is that something that is additional, so many years that it starting to bump up against a curb-to-curb reconstruction, or can you give any clarification on that?
I don't have a specific time frame, and I think if I understand your question right, you're asking, when would the 4-3 need to happen relative to the reconstruction? Am I understanding that right, or?
Not really. I was just trying to. I lost the thread a little bit on how long it might take through preliminary design and just a political decision to be made, and the pilot program, for example, to have a 4-3 reconstruction, an interim 4-3 reconstruction existing before that, potentially 7 years for a full curb-to-curb reconstruction. Or does it get to be so late that it might disappear because there's going to be a curb-to-curb reconstruction? I just kind of want to sort of, if I can understand potentially what are the two timelines that we're talking about.
Yeah, yep. So I don't have a specific time frame on a potential restriping project. We're doing some of that analysis now, and so in looking at it, so I don't have a specific time frame, but I think there would be merit potentially to it before any reconstruction efforts. I guess I should have mentioned the other reason I reference it as a pilot project. It's because I think it would help us learn a lot about the corridor, as I mentioned, and in advance of a reconstruction project. I think that information can be very helpful. And so, that's another reason it's referenced as a pilot project. But I wouldn't say necessarily, on the timing would be impacted based on the reconstruction project at all. It more has to do with making sure we do the analysis and understand, and then lay out the criteria for what we're looking at, and also make sure we're set up to do any sort of post-analysis as well. So, and just making sure that, it's an important corridor. It's a unique corridor. It's a very important corridor. And so we want to make sure that if we do something like that, we do it right. And so that's why we're taking a look at it and making sure we're doing our due diligence. So.
I have a question too on timing. When you say you're discussing when you might be able to do a restriping pilot, I think everyone here would be in agreement that the absolute sooner the better. It should have been done 10 years ago. But when can you say that you'll know if/when you'll do a restriping project? If you say you're discussing it now, will a decision be made in this calendar year?
Again, I'd love to give more concrete timeframes, and I understand these are important questions, and I'd love to be able to give you some more specific answers. Right now, and I'll tell you right now, what we're looking at is we're trying to learn more about who are the people using the corridor. Where do we think that they could potentially be deferred to if the current configuration wasn't available? And so that's what we're looking at right now. And then in the next month or two, we'll be working with our city partners to understand potential impacts to alternate routes. And so those are kind of some of the next immediate steps. So hopefully that gives you some insight on what we're looking at. We're not just sitting around talking about it. We're doing some real work and analysis on it. But I don't have a better time frame than that I can give you right now. But again, as we learn more, we're happy to come talk to you all and anyone that's interested, and keep sharing that information as that process develops. So,
okay. I just want to comment on that, and then another question is, one, the people that don't use the corridor because of its dangers and because of its dangers and because of the issues it has for being something that's unsafe to bike and or walk on. Usually, I think you're going to have like a lack of actual true accounting. So that is going to be something to think about. So when you think about like who's using it and who will be deferred, think about who's being deferred already because of the way it is. So I'd say one, and then two, is there a reason that 29th Street is not getting any sort of median protection or an RFP? Because technically that's a pedestrian crossing and it isn't actually one of the more busier intersections. 27th and 25th are obviously awful, and so I'm excited about these medians, but what about 29th Street is my question. And that's it.
Yeah, these two were selected really, as a result of some of the data that we had, and then also as a result of that listening session that we held. And really the community, many of the comments that we heard were on these two specific locations, and so that's how we focused our attention here. Like I said before, there's a number of locations that could use improvements, and really we think that the right way to do that is that reconstruction process, and that's why we're working towards that to address the whole corridor. So
I'm curious. You mentioned the volumes of people using these streets, and it seems like it's assuming that people are kind of attached to vehicles rather than that they're trying to get places. And I'm wondering what you're looking at, and in talking to Metro Transit about making the 4 more frequent bus route as it's been in the past, getting back to sort of its historical frequency, or increasing frequency, adding a BRT, doing any of the things that allow even more people to move along the street, but reduce the number of vehicles. So that's my first question, is how you're working with Metro Transit to get people out of cars so that you don't have that perceived need to move cars rather than people. And then I also have a concern about the design, specifically. What I hear from friends who drive is that in that kind of a scenario, they often don't want to stop because they're worried that the next car over, when it's 2 lanes in each direction, they're worried that they will stop and then they will witness somebody being killed because they gave somebody that right of way and the person following behind just blew past them. And that on Lindale, that seems to be a really frequent occurrence. And I'm curious what in the design protects, encourages drivers to stop rather than think, oh, if I stop, I'm going to witness the murder by another driver of a human being.
Yeah, so I can address your first question, that maybe we can transition back to Jason to talk about these specific locations and improvements. So yes, we agree, and we're going to be looking at everything and all users. So we want to benefit all users, and that's part of that data collection piece of it, is to make sure that whatever interim improvements, and then more so for a future reconstruct, that it is it's safe for everyone, and we want to understand who those users are. So you are correct, and those are, we'll be looking at all that and understanding all of that. So I hope I didn't give the wrong impression, and apologize if I did.
So you're talking to Metro Transit?
What's that?
You're talking to Metro Transit to figure out how you can increase bus service so that people don't feel the need to drive along this corridor?
Yeah, we talked to Metro Transit about this particular project that Jason is showing here, and we will definitely engage them in any 4 to 3 discussions as well. Yep.
Including providing better service that is more frequent and faster.
Yeah, I'm happy to have that conversation. We have that type of conversation on all of our projects, but those are conversations that we always have, and we would have similarly here as well. You obviously have more opportunities to make improvements with reconstruction type projects, but even on interim type projects, we are meeting with Metro Transit and talking about all those opportunities.
So I think I heard about the double threat issue with a 4-lane. So we feel that, you know, putting in the RFBs helps the drivers understand that there's someone crossing the road here. And we've set the stop bar back 30 feet, which is the guidance to when someone stops. When someone activates the RFB, people should be stopping back there. It does not eliminate that possibility of someone stopping and the left lane continuing through, but it does have that right lane stop further back so that someone's in that crosswalk, they can see that car in the left lane if they blow by that other car stopped.
What are the compliance rates for projects like this with the RRFB? Do you have those numbers?
I don't have them off the top of my head. RRFB compliance kind of is correlated with number of pedestrians crossing, and so we see higher compliance when there's more pedestrians using it, and the drivers are more used to seeing people there. If you had RFB with no people ever crossing, then the compliance goes down.
Yeah, another one of our hopes with this project that I think helps address your question a little bit, Julia, is that, you know, we're hoping by shifting the lanes out and putting the 12-foot median, which is pretty substantial, that, you know, we can help slow some people down. Now we understand it's not going to, you know, solve everything, but we think it's better than what's out there today for sure, and as an interim step and kind of the continuation to do what we can now while we really work towards that full reconstruction, like I said. So we think there's definitely an improvement there, and we hope that some of the lane changes would help reduce speed as well.
Then I'd also add that it takes away the left turns, so there's less conflict points that drivers have to react to and people have to keep their eyes out on. So we feel that for interim project, you know, the 12-foot median provides a 2-phase crossing of Lindale, understanding that the preferred is the 3-lane from this group. And so this 12-foot median doesn't preclude a restriping that might go to a 3-lane in the near future. So that's all I have to say right now.
This is Christopher. I just have one quick question. Has there been any thought of adding to the pilot program that we've talked about, potentially a restriping pilot program, a reduction in the speed limit? It seems like you're taking care to notify drivers of the pedestrians through having the stop line back 30 feet and to have the flashing lights. An additional thing which would give notice, i.e. more time for notice, is a reduced speed limit, obviously. Has that been discussed as being part of a pilot program?
You know, like I said, those conversations, we're kind of in the analysis phase now, but, you know, as you mentioned, then the next stage would really be consideration of what that would look like and some of those details. And so I'll definitely make note of it and, you know, for consideration.
I think also the statutes on how speed limits can be adjusted on county roads are a little different. So that will be something that will have to be discussed.
Thank you.
One thing I would like to say is that while I understand before you enter into a pilot project, you have to do some analysis and stuff. I think Julia's point earlier is that your analysis may be not fully accurate if people are, and I know I don't cross those streets or walk comfortably on Lindale Avenue. So I would encourage you and hope that the analysis period and the time for considering this is terse and to the point and short so that we can get into a restriping, because I think that the most important part here is the safety of pedestrians and people that are using the street and people who live in the residential areas. So that would be my encouragement.
Yeah, thanks. And that's a great comment. And, I just want to make clear, some of the other things that we're looking at are kind of some of the, potential key challenges that might arise, from a 3-lane configuration. And some of those are safety related challenges. Now, there's obviously a lot of benefits that I'm sure you all know about from a 4-to-3 conversion. But we want to make sure that we are looking at it holistically and then identifying any other key challenges that may arise as part of a conversion, and then work with our city partners to understand mitigation potential and what could we do to be prepared for it. Like I said, just really doing our due diligence so we're prepared and proactive. So, yeah.
Are there any other questions or comments for Jason and Kelsey? And
I guess I have one question, which is how this interacts with the fact that people can legally cross at any point along this stretch, and what you expect the result to be of creating a better crossing here, and how that'll impact overall ferocity of the street to people.
Yeah, I think I heard most of it. We hope that by providing improved crossings like this at 25th or 27th, that people utilize them, and that we are using some proven safety measures on both of these locations, and so we hope people use them, and that that improves the safety there. So.
But it should also improve the safety adjacent. I mean, I don't want people to have to go a long ways out of their way. If they should be able to cross mid-block here, since there's not traffic control devices at those intersections. Do you expect it to be improving the crossing for pedestrians for the whole segment?
Well, I think by providing them, at these locations, again, we're hopeful that they're used and that it provides a reasonable place to cross for people. That is definitely an improvement from what's out there today.
So if I'm understanding, your concern is someone can cross at a mid-block location, and that's going to be the most convenient way to cross if they're just trying to get across the street. And they probably wouldn't come down to this intersection to cross. Is that what I'm hearing correctly?
They shouldn't have to, correct. They shouldn't have to. People should be able to cross where it's convenient for them. And I don't know, it seems like this, if it calms drivers, it should calm them along the whole stretch. But it also seems like it could give drivers the false sense that they're only allowed to cross, which is already a problem. And I'm just curious if you have any insight into whether we can expect people to be able to cross where they want and need and are allowed to anywhere, and that'll be more pleasant regardless, or if it really is an improvement that does not have a corridor-wide impact on improving that.
I don't think we've had an analysis on that aspect. That'd be, I think, challenging to figure out, but we can discuss it.
any other feedback or comments? Nariman or Kelsey or Jason?
I was just going to say, here's our contact information. And then also there's a website for this median project for future reference. And thank you for having us. And I'm sure we'll be in touch about this corridor many times in the future.
You will come back if you get to pilot project. Is that correct, Jason? You'd be coming back.
Yeah, they're really, that would be another, outreach and engagement effort separate from this, but we didn't want to ignore it either, because we know that's what a lot of people are interested in. And so we wanted to be able to talk about that here, but we hope to have more to share, and we'll do that for sure.
Okay, great. Well, thank you, all of you. And we will move on now to Fairview Park with Katie White back again. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.
Hello again. I'm going to pull up the Fairview Park graphic. So I was last here, gosh, several months ago now, to talk about Fairview Park. And, you know, most of our projects we bring to you and then we stop at about 30% and get your sign off on the general concept before it goes to detailed engineering. And with Fairview Park, the closer we got to detailed engineering as we advanced to the 60% threshold is what we call it, we realized that there was some a pretty big obstacle in our way to advancing the design that you guys looked at. And so we wanted to show you what we've come up with instead, a modified design now that we've made a pretty substantial change. So this is 4th Street North. It's a north-south street. So here the south end of the corridor is 26th over here on the right. And then the northern end of the corridor is 28th here on the left. And what we're going to focus on is this quadrant with 28th. So I'm going to zoom in and, you know, we have a 6-foot sidewalk. We aren't taking out any of these trees. You know, that part hasn't changed. But I am going to zoom in over here to talk about this. I'll do one more to talk about this part. So what we were planning to do was end the sidewalk about where you can see my cursor here. There's a beautiful tree here, which you can see illustrated with this graphic tree, but you can see how big the tree canopy is in the aerial photo here, right? It's a gorgeous big tree. And the park board's not interested in taking it out. We're not interested in taking it out. It's not elm, it's not ash, you know, susceptible to a disease. And so they wanted to keep it. And so our goal was to put in a crossing here, just short of where a normal pedestrian crossing would be, and do a receiving end pedestrian crossing over here, just short of where it would normally be. And we got into designing what the construction of that looks like. But to put in this curb ramp just short where we thought it was going to be, it was going to damage the root structure too much to this giant, beautiful tree. So we tossed around some options about what we could do on this side of the street, on this side of 28th, to make this a reality. And we came up with an option that adds even more sidewalk, actually, is what we came up with. So what we're proposing now is that here's the traditional sidewalk, you know, with a boulevard space separating you from the curb. Now what we're doing is we're bumping the sidewalk into the street itself. So the traditional curb would be about where the back of the sidewalk is now. So putting a new curb line into the driving space or parking space, and then reconnecting with this, the curb on the north side here, and then adding another pedestrian ramp crossing here on the north side of 28th. So since we're adding another, I've missed the measurements here, 30 feet or so of sidewalk, we want to let you know that this change was being made to improve the pedestrian accessibility of 4th Street North at Fairview Park. But wanted you to know that it's just different than how we thought it was going to be in the first place.
That sounds like a fine reason for the change, and it looks good to me.
That's awesome. I hope you use that that becomes department-wide problem solving. Anything that preserves gorgeous trees and gives even more pedestrian access is a really lovely, lovely thing.
Thanks. That's all I have.
Any other comments for Katie? Or it looks great, Katie. I love that you kept that tree. It looks like it's maybe it's a maple. I have a big maple in my yard. It looks beautiful.
All right, terrific. Thanks so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Is Katie gone?
No, I'm here, Julia. What's up?
Do you have any tips for future projects like this? Like, what made it work that you were able to do this, protect the tree, really provide good access that seems like it'll work for people with impaired vision, et cetera? What made this one work?
I think because it's a relatively low-use street, but it's a pretty wide street to begin with. I think it was 32 feet, and our traffic department said, well, yeah, you can take away 8 feet or 6 feet, or I'm losing the dimensions right now, but traffic said, yeah, there's plenty of through lane space there anyways. if you were to bump it out. And so there was plenty of space in the roadway. And at the same time, you know, we did hear from some neighbors that actually Chris is going to talk to you about Lindale next, and Lindale is on the other side of this park in part. And we heard from some neighbors that some people use Fourth instead of Lindale because they think they can go faster on Fourth. And so the idea of making, you know, a pinch point here was also a no-brainer, and we were comfortable with that too.
Thank you.
I did the car ped count right at that spot last fall, and that definitely cars use that street to race right through it during that evening rush hour.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. Thank you, Katie.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Chris, you're up.
Cool. I will go ahead and share my screen. Just 1 second. All right, so I'm here to talk about Lindale Ave North pedestrian safety improvement project, and I'm just going to pull up the map real quick here from this one pager. I was here, I forget exactly when it was, I think sometime earlier this year, to do an introduction to the project. I just realized it doesn't say this on the agenda. This project's at, I'll call it like 25%. It's somewhere between like 20 and 30%. Definitely room to still adjust these designs. And so I've got a couple key questions that I'm hoping to ask you about, one main one, and then anything else that you all are wanting to suggest for the project. I would love to hear it and have a resolution right now, I think would be appropriate too, if you all are interested in that. So 7 intersections between 40th Ave now north at the north end and 22nd Ave north at the south end. Lindale Ave North on the kind of right side of the image here, I'll zoom in, has 1 northbound lane for vehicle traffic, 1 southbound lane for vehicle traffic, a southbound parking lane, and then sidewalks with at least some amount of boulevard space for most of the corridor. So that's what we're dealing with here. And another just refresher reminder, the real problem out here, I guess I would say, is speed, which obviously you can say that about a lot of our streets, but it's definitely very much an issue here. We did a speed study, and almost everyone is over the posted of what at the time was a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. It's now a 25-mile-an-hour speed limit. A very good chunk of people are going over 40, probably over 45. It's really fast, and you can feel it out there. And that has had an impact on the number of fatalities and incapacitating pedestrian injuries out here. So that's just some of the impetus for the project. I'm going to kind of go through. I'm not planning to like stop on every intersection. I'm going to do sort of a high level presentation of what we're proposing out here, and then I'm happy to kind of bounce around to any specific intersection if you like it. But really, what we're kind of honing in on here and what we're at with engagement is 2 main types of designs. So for each intersection, kind of the main type of design we have here is this first one that I'm showing here, which I'll call an S-curve. It's got a sort of a chicane or curve in the roadway here, bump outs. At the various corners, you can sort of see the previous curb line here. So a lot of changing in the curb line on these. So yeah, this is one option, kind of the S curve. And then the second sort of general option is still a little bit of the S curve design here. You'll see there's still a little bit of right to left movement for vehicles when they're driving, so it's not just straight through, which we know that causes folks in vehicles to slow down, and that's the intention behind the design. But then this other option is to have a median as a part of this as well. Some of the obvious benefits, I think, of a median is it allows you to take kind of 1 lane of traffic at a time as a person who's walking or biking or rolling in any form across this intersection. right now we're showing a 6-foot median. I'd be interested on your thoughts on a 6-foot median versus potentially either taking space from kind of either side, or I'm going to go ahead and guess that you'll have something to say about the 13-foot lanes, and I'd be interested in hearing all your feedback on that and what you'd like to see here. So those dimensions are things that are definitely still on the table and would like to hear about. One last piece that I just wanted to throw out here is, because this is not a full reconstruction, we're dealing with each intersection on like an intersection basis. We're just going in and kind of retrofitting these. Budget is something that plays a little bit of a different role in the design. I think kind of essentially the farther away from the intersection we get with any of these designs, the more it's going to cost. But I think there's the ability to improve these designs with some of these features that aren't immediately adjacent to the intersection. So just one thing that we're keeping in mind is making sure that we stay in budget for this. And as we do that, kind of thinking through what aspects of this may have to be cut back on. So like, for example, in final design, it could be possible that like for one of these intersections or something like that, we may have to adjust what this taper looks like and not address this with actual curb work in like this southwest quadrant here, but perhaps do something temporary along with it. And so those are just some of the things that are a little bit in flux. And we will also be upgrading all the curb ramps for ADA compliancy at these spots as well. So if you were able to look through these, you'll see a lot of these intersections are basically just kind of copies. The corridor doesn't have too many changes. So for the most part, it's kind of those two designs applied at these different intersections. I will call out, this one is on the opposite side of Katie's project that she just talked about at Fairview Park. There are a few different designs here that we're still kind of deciding between for the park access and how to address this area. Basically, again, kind of coming down to the question of if we should do a median or not, and then if we choose either way, kind of some of the dimensions of looking through those. So that is generally kind of the things I'm hoping to get, and then obviously wherever you all want to take it as well. So I'll just open it up for questions from the group or comments.
Chris, I just have one question regarding funding and then the budget part of it. At first blush, just speaking for myself, the medians appear more beneficial in this context. Having said that, what are they giving up specifically? Is it could more intersections be treated with the second, the non-median revision, or where does the money come from if medians are put in? Does it shrink the project meaningfully?
So I'll just give a really brief budget overview. So this is we were awarded federal funds for this. So we got $1 million of federal funding. There's a minimum 20% local match. And then we have about $2 million total for this project, which also includes like the costs of like engineering and soft costs, as well as like kind of the hard costs and capital costs. So basically, the funding is pretty much set, and it's figuring out how far we can take the design with that funding, if that framing kind of makes sense. The medians typically cost a little bit more in the cost estimates that we've put together. But I mean, I guess to kind of get to the heart of your question of when it really gets down to it, what we will have to see, like if we decide. The first thing here is to say, like, okay, do we want medians? And I have been hearing that from engagement so far, like pretty consistently. So if that's a pretty resounding answer from this group, then what we'll try and do is apply that concept throughout the corridor and see where our cost estimates are again. If we're able to get all 7 intersections with medians, and that's what we want and what like we hear through our engagement, then that would kind of be the end of it. If we're coming up right at like up against the budget and we're not sure if we're going to be able to hit that, then we would want to have a conversation about, is there one intersection or two intersections, or how do we make that work, and do we pull a median out of one of these intersections and just do kind of the S-curve design, and does that get us to where we need to be? So I don't know if that helps narrow it down or answer your question.
That's the answer. Yep, that helps me. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Say, Chris, it's Peter. The S curves and chicanes are feel new to me, and we're seeing it a lot on these recent designs of Grand Avenue, et cetera. I know we have high hopes for it. What are the? Do you have specifics as to the efficacy of these S curves, chicanes with lanes that are otherwise, 13 feet wide? What we see elsewhere in the country, elsewhere in the state, metro, et cetera. What are our hopes for that, or how confident are we on this?
Well, so I don't know that I can give you like a number and say like right now we're seeing our 85th percentile is like 15% of people are going over 40 miles an hour. I don't know if I can tell you like now 15% of people will be going over 35 or like down to that number exactly, but I guess what we do know generally from kind of these design principles is that when you introduce that shift in the roadway, it kind of forces drivers to be a little bit more alert and have to slow down to adjust to that curb moving side to side. I think we'd want to study this to help us get closer to being able to say, like, when we do a chicane like this, we've seen a reduction in like 5 miles an hour on average, or 10 miles an hour, or something like that, whatever it may be. The other thing that it gives the option for is like, if we did this project and we're still seeing a speeding issue and a crash issue out here, one thing that I know that has good data behind it is called like the gateway effect. And this kind of sets us up to be able to do something like that. And basically a gateway effect with like an RRFB, for example, would be where you'd have signage on the median and on each side of the roadway here. And that helps to increase the rate at which people driving cars yield for people who are crossing the street. So that's I just throw that out as one other data point where we know this kind of design help slow people down and make people more compliant to stop their vehicles. But
okay, yeah, Chris, yeah, sure, thanks. And that, I guess it will be those are two different roads between Lindale and Grand. They're getting similar. It would get similar treatments. It'd be good comparisons. That's all. Thanks.
Thanks.
Can you talk about those lane widths? They're pretty.
Yeah. So I'll just say what's out here right now based on this, and I mean I hear what this group says a lot. I think basically I would like to hear you all say what you want here, and that'll help me to be able to push the design out.
9 feet and better plans.
So right now what it's showing is a 10-foot travel lane, 1 foot reaction on the median, and then 2-foot gutter pans on the side. I think, and Matthew, maybe I'll look to you here. I think the lowest that we would go, I want to say is 12. Maybe that's maybe 11. I guess I'm not sure if we've gone below 11 on a kind of a median design like this.
Well, I actually think this is the lowest we'll go according to our current standard. And so what I mean by that is that, there's 10 feet of a travel lane, and then there's the gutter pan. So the right side gutter pan is 2 feet wide, and the inside is 1 foot wide. And so I think according to our current standard, this would be the lowest we would go. Now, I think there is, if we were able to, construct a 1 foot outside gutter pan, then you could probably bring it down a foot. But so I guess I would just say this is what I understand to be our standard.
Didn't we get a 9-foot lane in that project by the school?
Well, and I can just address the 9-foot lane quickly. That's something that we wouldn't even be able to consider a a 9-foot lane with this because it is MSA, state aid, and like federal standards. Anywhere that the only way we would be able to do an actual 9-foot lane, like a true 9-foot lane, would be on a city-owned street that doesn't get any outside funding at all and doesn't have to comply with
Well, and also
state aid standards.
Also, I'll clarify the 9 foot is it's less of a lane dimension. I mean, it is allocating space, but that's on, gosh, what are the new street type called? Neighborhood column street or something like that. But basically the cross streets that you see here, you know, we lowered our standard from I think 32 to 30, and so what that does is it just like leaves 18 feet in the middle, I think. Anyway, I guess what I'm saying is like we don't stripe a 9-foot lane. It's just on our lower volume kind of side street neighborhood streets. It does go lower than 10, I guess, if that makes sense.
So it obviously you all like get to decide what's in your resolution.
Yeah.
I'll offer up that like if you put in a resolution that you want to see 12-foot lanes here, I think that would be probably the most realistic thing that we could look into in the manner that Matthew just said, of like seeing if we're able to get rid of a foot of that gutter pan and if that makes sense in this location. But if you want to push on that, I mean, if you put that in the resolution, I will look into what we can do here.
Is there a harm in asking for what we want rather than what is feasible with the technical preferences and style guides of the city?
If I could answer that, Chris, I'll say I think you can ask for what you want. I think what I think at least Chris and I were trying to articulate here is like the way to get a little bit lower. So we definitely just can't go lower without making the change that we talked about. So you definitely can ask for it to go lower than 13, but it's not something that we can necessarily say yes to unless we're able to adjust the gutter pan.
So yeah, so I think it'd be useful to me if you've phrased it as the gutter pan way. Then I mean, either way, I'll probably bring that up more like directly with the engineers and kind of discuss that. So that point's gonna get across, and like I'll definitely bring that up.
That's the inside gutter pan, but then there's the outside, which is more of the water collection, if I'm understanding correctly, based on this project. So sometimes we can go down to 18 inches with that, depending on the storm drain grates, if I'm understanding correctly, the discussions that are happening between transportation and storm water management.
I'm less sure about the details, but yeah, I think that'd be something that like to ask us to explore, and I can definitely commit to exploring that seriously.
So I want to clarify though, because Julie, I was talking about the outside gutter pan. So the inside is already 1 foot, and then you have the 10-foot travel lane, so that's 11, and then it's a 2-foot gutter pan. So when I talk about reducing possibly the gutter pan, I am talking about the sidewalk side, the outside.
And one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is that I am working with our green infrastructure coordinator on this project, and as we kind of we've already started some conversations, but especially once we have a better idea of what these designs look like towards like 30% and beyond, then we'll be digging into the stormwater green infrastructure aspect of that. So I honestly just don't know how that has the potential to impact the gutter pan, but that's something that could help us get to that. So just another thing to consider.
Did you look at tabled or raised intersections in addition to or instead of the medians?
No, and frankly, I don't think that this is the type of project like this retrofit on this corridor. I would argue just wouldn't be the place. What my hesitation would be on a street where people are driving 50, if we put them in and they like, I'm using quotes here for those who can't see me, like don't work, or if they like cause issues, that could just be, I don't know. I think without knowing a lot about how those work and trying those on other types of like arterial-esque corridors like this where traffic is moving so fast and it's just a retrofit, I would just worry about that, to be honest.
Because drivers would go airborne.
Potentially, yeah. And like obviously that's a driver, like the issue there is how the driver is behaving. I just don't think that, I don't know that we would be able to design that in a way that wouldn't have major issues once built, if that makes sense. Just being kind of frank about that, I guess. But we also we haven't I haven't considered that prior to now, so that's just kind of my gut reaction, I guess.
I like seeing the shifting, the S-curve stuff going on. I appreciate that treatment.
Thanks. And then, so I heard some support for kind of the median design. I guess I'd be interested from hearing from everybody or anyone who's willing to weigh in of like, is that what you all would like to see, or did you like the other one, or?
What's the traffic kind of, I guess the median thing seems interesting if you have low volumes of vehicle traffic where you're getting drivers, that's where you're getting the speeding. And the median seems like it functions in the place of having enough other cars on the road to start calming people down. But I'm curious what your insight would be around that specifically.
So we put out temporary like bollards and paint medians and bump outs along this intersection, and I went out and tested it, and I don't think any car ever would have stopped for me as a pedestrian without anything out there. The first time I went out and tried to cross with the median bollards there, it was not the first car. It was either the second or the third car in a line of 3 cars, but they stopped for me. So within 5 seconds, I was able to like safely cross that intersection with completely stopped traffic, and it felt really nice. And like I think with curb out there wouldn't be a way for like another car to like zoom around them and have that threat to me. So based on my kind of experience out there, the median design worked well to stop flowing traffic, which then made it easier to at least take that leg of the street. And in my experience, once you're standing in a median, it's a lot easier to have people stop for that second leg. That's probably not always true, and I'm sure there are examples.
Stop on green lights when I'm in a median and give me the right of way when it's like a signalized intersection. It's been weird, and if they're offering, but yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Chris, this is maybe a totally weird question, but is there any lighting on any of these medians, or is there pedestrian lighting? Is that part of this to make sure that people see what's going on with pedestrians?
It isn't currently a part of this project to look at lighting or enhancing lighting. I mean, if that's something you all want to put in here, I think it'd be worth kind of looking into this. I'm not sure. I think that's going to be outside of the scope of this project, frankly. But yeah, so as of now, there's no lighting upgrades planned or anything like that.
Okay.
Well, Chris, I think that the median is my preference. For the two big reasons that you've already articulated. One, it visually, I think, and physically will slow down traffic, and also it will permit pedestrians to only necessarily commit to crossing one lane successfully at a time than the two. It just gives another opportunity to make sure that it's safe to go and that the oncoming traffic doesn't continue to speed through while one lane does stop for you.
Thanks.
I would agree. I think the median is a good idea.
Oh, and I'll add, and then Julie, I'll let you go, but it will be in-lane transit stops either way. And so I think another added benefit of that median is that then vehicles will find it much harder. I won't say that it's impossible because people can do crazy things, but they'll find it much harder to go around that stopped traffic for the bus unloading and loading. Julia?
I think this median is the kind that I like to see, that it's not preventing or adding extra barriers to mid-block crossings, and it has full pedestrian crossing protection. So I think I'm leaning towards supporting that, but I also want to make sure that we don't lose like the little gray concrete nub for left turn action. It seems like we often see medians that are basically do not provide island protection for people crossing, and I don't know what the possibilities are within this project for things to get cut.
I would love for you to put that in the resolution.
And can we get?
I also agree that's a very important safety feature that unfortunately we cut at times.
Oh, okay.
Julia, would you repeat that, please? I'm typing up the notes, and I'm trying to do the resolution on fire. What was that last feature that Chris?
I don't know the term for it, but it's that little concrete thing that sticks out and makes the drivers then have to do tighter turns when it sticks out. And
I call it the nose of the median. I don't know if that's a technical term, but like, yeah, this if you can see my cursor, this little piece here, and it might not look exactly like this in like final design, like this half dome shape or whatever, but I do think it's an important element.
We did it there with a vertical element on it. Like whether it's a reflector thing or.
Oh yeah, what I believe. I guess I'm not sure. I think typically when we have the nose, there would be a vertical element on it. Matthew, do you know? Am I wrong on that?
Sorry, that is a good question, and I think the answer is yes. And they've been run over in the past, but
yeah,
better than not.
That's why I asked the question about lighting. I've been on a median with the reflector at night and had somebody almost come up on the median where I was. So that always scared me. But okay.
A big 3-foot round planter with flowers in it during the spring would be beautiful.
Yeah, really.
Yeah, in all seriousness, we are looking at green infrastructure kind of wherever we can. So not my area of expertise, but coordinating very closely with on that piece.
Setting more vertical elements that can include in the medians, I think the better from our point of view.
Okay, I'm frankly, I'm not sure that. I don't know that it precludes it. I think the storm infrastructure stuff that we tend towards ends up being a lot of like below ground or like lower type stuff. So I don't know, but again,
I've noticed that, and I think for this kind of thing with the calming impacts, especially when we're looking at 13-foot lanes, we need to get verticals in there, whether it's like trees that do well in swale type things or looking more at the stormwater only on the boulevards rather than in the median and treating the median like a standard boulevard and doing just trees.
Okay, I can definitely bring that point up.
Okay. Well, thank you, Chris.
Yeah, thanks.
We're almost out of time.
Yeah, nice work keeping us on track, Barb.
Oh yeah, doing my very best.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good night.
Thank you.